G'day you mob, Pete here, and this is another episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today I have a Goss episode for you where I sit down with my old man, my father, Ian Smisson, and we talk about the week's news, whether locally down under here in Australia or non-locally overseas in other parts of the world. Okay, and we sometimes also talk about whatever comes to mind, right? If we can think of something interesting to share with you guys related to us or Australia, we also talk about that in the Goss. So these episodes are specifically designed to try and give you content about many different topics where we're obviously speaking in English and there are multiple people having a natural and spontaneous conversation in English. So it is particularly good to improve your listening skills. In order to complement that though, I really recommend that you join the podcast membership or the academy membership at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get access to the full transcripts of these episodes, the PDFs, the downloads, and you can also use the online PDF reader to read and listen at the same time. Okay, so if you really want to improve your listening skills fast, get the transcript, listen and read at the same time, keep practicing, and that is the quickest way to level up your English. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on a bit. I've been talking a bit. Let's just get into this episode, guys. Smack the bird, and let's get into it. Dad, how's it going? Welcome to the Goss. What's going on? What's a Goss? What's up?
Yeah, well, we've both been sick, so...
That's been a bucket of laughs.
Oh, yeah, it's a regular riot. I shouldn't laugh, I'll cough again.
I know, I'm the same, yeah. So forgive us, guys, if we have to cough away from the mic.
If we start talking like this.
I know, yeah, if my voice breaks again. I'm so glad to have that back after,
after 20 years.
3 weeks of not being able to speak properly. Just let me open my beer here. How have you been anyway?
Yeah, well, apart from the illness, pretty good. And again, apologies if I'm doing this because I've just got a new glasses prescription, a new pair of glasses, and they're multifocals. So obviously
really?
the focal plane in them changes from infinity to reading distance.
So those glasses though that don't actually have the
it's not bifocal.
Out.
Bifocals are the ones with long distance and short distance as two separate lenses effectively glued together.
That's what I was thinking.
Multifocals, it's the one piece of glass, and they vary the focusing across it. But that means that to get various distances of focus, you've got to sort of move your head around. So I'm just getting used to this. Once you get used to it, you just sort of slot straight in. But I'll be doing this, trying to read. So.
All right. I'm just going to make sure that I've actually got the internet so that I can look this stuff up because I think it's just dropped off. Well, do you want to start this episode?
Yeah, I'm down to sort of 1 bar on wireless. I'm not sure what's going on there.
This episode, we could chat about cockatoos and silos.
Cockatoos and silos,
they seem to go well together.
They go well together, yeah. And there's a couple of sort of random stories as well. So
do you want to tell us about your recent trip to Northwest
Victoria?
Western Australia.
Northwest Australia is a bit too far to drive.
Yeah, that's quite a hike.
That's a week's drive just to get there. Northwestern Victoria. I spent last Saturday, today's Sunday, because obviously we have no idea when this episode will go out, but today is Sunday, and so 8 days ago I spent some time up in the Little Desert National Park in Victoria, Northwest Victoria, on the annual southeastern red-tailed black cockatoo count. Mm-hmm. So the southeastern subspecies of the red-tailed black cockatoo is endangered, and there's only allegedly about 1,500 individuals that are left. And every year, BirdLife Australia has a count, and they allocate about, I think it's between 60 and 100 different sites in southern South Australia and in Western Victoria to people, and you just do a drive around. And so I got this little spot in the Little Desert National Park, and drove 6 hours, drove 150 kilometres, and you obviously, and the method you use is when you get into, I'm jumping around, when these birds get into stringy bark forest, they're feeding, particularly at this time of the year when the new buds are coming, and so they're feeding on those. And so you're driving around, but you're only really stopping to look and listen in the stringy bark forest.
Otherwise, it's a waste of your time.
Otherwise, it's a waste. Yeah, you'd be driving down through farmland, and they're not going to be there.
I was on the highway, didn't see any.
Exactly, didn't see a thing. And the idea is that there's 3 signs of them. Obviously, you can see them, and you can hear their calls, but you can also see what are called chewings, where they sit up in the trees and they grab hold of the newly grown branches, and they're basically just ripping them off.
Cockatoos make one hell of a mess.
Yeah.
Especially the black
they grab the
cockatoos.
little buds and then they just drop the rest of it on the ground. So you're driving around looking for the chewings on the ground, and then the method I was using was one of the recommended methods for detecting them is you drive at every 500 metres, you stop, turn the car engine off, and listen for a minute to see if you can hear the calls. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if you can see them, you know they're there. But if you then hear the calls, then you've got to try and find them and then count the number that are there and so on. So, so I spent 6 hours during the day, drove 150 kilometres around, didn't see one. But that data is useful. It doesn't matter whether yes, you'd like to see the birds, but having spent a day there, I can pretty genuinely say that I didn't see one, didn't hear one, didn't see any sign of chewing. So it is highly unlikely that there had been any there for the previous week or two. So.
And why is that sort of absence data important in this case?
Well, I think it's one of those ones where absence data is useful in almost every scientific study. And you're a research scientist or used to be as well. Mm-hmm. And so people often think that the positive result is what people are looking for. But a negative result, as in finding 0, is not finding nothing.
It's still data.
It is still data. It is still useful information. So knowing that there are no birds in that area this time this year could be compared with last year or next year or previous years. It could be looked at. And there was a significant amount of fire that has gone on in this area over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And so it could be that they don't come back to areas until a few years after fire and so on. So having a 0 count in an area is as useful, if not more useful, in the longer term ecological study of the birds than me coming back and saying I saw 10 birds.
Yeah.
Seeing 10 birds will give us a number in terms of saying, well, we think the population is this. But from the broader scale study, it's just as important to record zeros.
So what is it like in the northwestern part of Victoria? Do you want to describe a little bit of how the countryside there is a little bit different, and maybe talk about the Mallee a bit, because there's a really interesting bird called the Mallee fowl.
Mallee fowl,
which is kind of like a chicken-sized bird.
Bigger than a chicken size, yeah.
But they're interesting, right, because they build these mounds.
The males build the mounds.
Sand and dirt and
they're basically
foliage.
Leaf litter. Yeah.
And then they obviously the females lay the eggs in the mound in order to incubate them. But the male, I think, does the male and the female
just the male
monitors the nest by moving the leaf litter around and turning it.
Yeah, and they actually dig a little hole and stick their beak in to monitor the temperature.
Yeah.
Because they try and keep the temperature at the exact temperature that is needed to incubate the eggs properly.
It's phenomenal.
And they move the sand and leaf litter around to make it deeper or shallower. To maintain that temperature. It is amazing.
And I sent you recently.
Yeah,
I think they got the first footage of a chick
hatching
emerging
out of a mound.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that it can survive even just a few minutes after it gets out of the egg. Well, I guess if it's in the egg, it's getting enough oxygen from the surrounding environment.
It's not buried in soil. That's the thing, is that it's really a combination of a bit of sand and leaf litter. So it's fairly porous to air movement, which is why the birds need to keep monitoring the air temperature. If it was just buried in the sand deeply, then the temperature wouldn't change very much.
Yeah.
And that's how, things like turtles and crocodiles and things, once you bury your eggs deep into sand, it'll stay the same temperature. But in the case of the Mallee fowl, because it's such a porous nest, for want of a better term, a mound, then the temperature will change with the air temperature. So the bird is constantly monitoring and managing the amount of cover over the eggs.
Well, I thought it was really interesting. I was asking my members in the WhatsApp group for the Academy recently, who can tell me what Mallee means? And it was a bit of a trick question.
Yeah.
Because it can be both the place.
Yes, because there is a location. The Victoria is notionally divided up, and there's no sort of administrative or government set up around it.
Yeah.
But it is notionally divided up into various regions, and the most northwesterly region is called the Mallee region.
Yeah.
So it is a geographical administrative sort of region.
And secondly, why is it called the Mallee region?
Because there are mallee trees there.
Exactly.
And so the mallees are ironically a form of eucalypt.
Yeah.
The mallee form is where you get this really big root ball that grows, some of it above the ground, and branching, and you get sort of lots of branching coming out directly from that. So there's no tree trunk on a mallee tree. They're just sort of a ball with lots of trunks coming out of them. And so they're common in that area of Victoria and South Australia, and a little bit of New South Wales, because it's semi-desert. It's very dry country, but it does get reasonably regular, if infrequent, to distinguish between those two words, rainfall. So
regularly infrequent.
Regular can be once a year.
Yeah, it just happens on a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's just infrequent that it doesn't happen very often.
That's right. And so it's semi-desert in the sense that the average annual rainfall is quite low.
Yeah.
But it is predictable in the sense that you will get rain almost every year unless there's a really severe drought. But what those big root systems are doing is effectively drought-proofing the trees, because the amount of water and nutrients that can be stored in these big root balls is quite large.
Well, I think, if memory serves me correctly, the reason I was asking the members in this group about Mallee was because I'd shared them a video with a gentleman, I think he was in his 80s or 90s, who had found the largest stump ever. In I don't know if it was just that region, it's probably Australia, but it was something like 10 to 20 tons of wood.
Yeah.
It was massive. It's
root
on display in this town. There was this video on him, and he was like, during the 40s or the 50s, whenever it was, they were going out and trying to clear these roots up, and they had a competition to see who could find the largest one.
Right.
And they dug this thing up and brought it into town, and were just blown away with its huge size. And I think they were saying that the wood was incredible for burning.
It is, and that was because it's marginal agricultural country.
Yeah.
So there are some areas where the soil quality is very poor from an agricultural point of view. It's just basically sand, and so you can't really grow much on it. And that's the mallee trees do quite well in that, unless it is just complete sand, in which case you can't hold any nutrients because they just drain away. But when people were clearing that land, mostly for cropping, so it's grain crops, wheat, oats, barley are the most common ones. There's some others up there as well, but hence the silos, which we'll get onto. But the mallee trees were all over the place, and obviously people were cutting them down, and they were using the timber for making fences and burning and things.
Because you're going to cut them down, you might as well use it for something useful.
Use it for something. You don't just throw it aside.
Yeah, exactly. Or just burn it off.
But then they found out that the mallee roots themselves were really good burning for fire because they were storing a lot of nutrients, which is mostly carbon nutrients in the case of that. So they burn really well and for really long. And so, there was an industry, and I don't know how much of it is left now because there's not a lot of clearing of mallee anymore, because most of it is either already cleared or it's in national parks or state parks that you can't clear.
I imagine there used to be it's slow growing though, right?
Yeah,
that's why it gets really dense wood, so it burns slowly as well. Sorry, continue.
No, and so, there used to be a big industry and we had a wood burning stove at home when I was a child. And every now and then, Dad would know somebody down the pub who, had a truckload of mallee roots, and we'd get a pile of mallee roots dumped in the driveway. And it was my job to try and, cut them up with an axe, and they were really hard and dense.
That'd be a fun job.
Because even the small ones, this sort of size, were, quite large to put into a wood burning stove. You couldn't really do it too easily, so they were cut up. And now there's a sort of secondary or tertiary industry around them now of people using them for wood carving, because it's really, because the wood is dense, but it's also made up of a whole lot of roots and branches and stumps and things coming out of it. There's lots of knot and really good, interesting texture in them. So people use them for making furniture and artwork and those sorts of things.
Well, I've seen a lot of. I hesitate to say Vietnamese. I have a feeling that they were Vietnamese carvers. You guys who are listening can probably correct me if I'm wrong. I think I've seen Chinese as well, but there are a lot of Asian cultural practices where they do these insane carvings on massive tree trunks or roots or large logs, and it just looks like it's years and years of work. Yeah. And then, you see these videos of people doing it, and you're just like, this is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Before we get on to silos, can you tell me the origin of the word cockatoo?
No, I don't know. No.
Do you reckon it'd be indigenous?
It sounds indigenous, or at least it sounds like an anglicised version of an indigenous word. But
well, I guess, an anglicised version of any foreign word would have originally been indigenous somewhere.
Yeah.
No, so I always assumed too that it was an indigenous word because it has this oo at the end, like kangaroo. Cockatoo.
And it has that cadence.
Well, kookaburra.
Kangaroo, kookaburra.
Yeah.
Yara, yara.
No, it is. We got it from the Dutch Cockatoo.
Oh, yes.
From the 17th century, because the Dutch East India Company, was it called? The Dutch East India Company that was trading all throughout.
What is now Indonesia.
Indonesia, so they had colonies there, obviously. They were doing a lot of trading.
Plenty of cockatoos up there.
They have parrots and cockatoos throughout Southeast Asia, and obviously they were doing that prior to Australia being colonised and cockatoos being given a name that obviously wasn't an indigenous name. And the Dutch got it from the Malay Cockatoos.
Right.
So that the word cockatoo actually comes from the Malay.
Okay.
The Malay culture or language originally.
The generic name is Cockatoos, which is obviously a version of that as well.
Exactly. So I just thought that was really interesting. I never thought about it originally.
No, it's one of those that I hadn't thought about. I should have. So I've learned something.
There you go. Well, that's it.
Yeah. Right, we're done.
Yeah, silos.
Silos, yeah. So obviously because this country is... the agricultural practices up there are mostly around growing grain, then there are grain elevators, as they are called in most places around the world, which is just giant concrete or steel cylinders.
So these aren't silos. Elevators that go up and down on buildings. They're more things that elevate the grain and take the grain off the ground.
Take the grain off the ground.
Store it.
For two purposes. One is storage, but secondly, for transportation, so that the grain is effectively lifted off the ground, so it can then be put into trains, and transported
trucks
into. Well, it's mostly trucks taking them there, and then the trains taking them away. So there's this, unfortunately, severely reduced now, but there's a huge network of railways throughout southwestern, northwestern Victoria, southeastern Australia, and bits of southwestern New South Wales. And all the way, in fact, up into Queensland, that are just simply there for transporting grain. Yeah. That's all they were put there for. But now with because mostly, originally when the trains went in, farmers were literally taking cartloads of grain and getting them stored there, to go by train. So the trains had to be close to the farms. But now with trucks, the farmers can, hire, trucks, large trucks to take the grain further away than they originally would. So the railway network doesn't have to be as vast as it used to be. And so now there are these huge silos, scattered around every country town in southwestern Victoria and northern Victoria, has silos associated with them where grain is being collected. And it's wheat, barley, oats, rye. There's all sorts of different grains that are being collected there. And the interesting part of that now in Australia is that it's become, over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, it's become a tourist attraction because a lot of towns have got artists to come and paint the silos, and they put these huge murals on there. So there's this giant network of silo art around Australia now, and it's one of my little projects of photographing all the silo art when I'm travelling around as well.
So what makes a good photo of a silo?
Silos themselves are interesting from an architectural point of view, but when you've got these beautiful paintings on them as well. Particularly in in the various regions, like the Wimmera and Mallee region in that northwestern Victoria, there was a coordinated effort amongst 6 different towns to do that, and they all, each town hired their own artist, and the artist decided what they wanted to paint on them. But there was a coordination, so there were individualised themes. It wasn't like everybody just went and painted a cockatoo. So you've got 6 different cockatoo paintings. And so some did wildlife,
usually tied into
the local
area,
thing,
right?
yeah. And that first silo art trail in the Wimmera in Victoria was mostly related to people. So it was the culture of the local people there, and so there's everything from the indigenous people through to one of them, the most southerly one in Rapanyup, where our family were original European settlers there. They have 2, a young man and a young woman, who are both sports people. There's a netball player and a footballer, making the point that, a lot of the culture around small towns now is around sporting teams. They become the sort of centre of the town's culture. So there's everything from the original indigenous people through to sort of sport. And obviously there's a lot of farming things. There's one with a farmer and his dog.
I remember that one. I think that was one of the first, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's sheep. There's farmers with horses. There's it's a variety of those sort of things.
Do you think it's good that it's obviously encouraging people to go out and see these smaller towns where they may have previously not thought to?
Yeah, they were just drive-bys.
Go, touristically, and it's also giving work to artists that previously wouldn't have been available to them.
Yeah, exactly. And these are very large scale works.
Yeah.
So this would take weeks for somebody to go and paint. And from a tourist point of view, I've been travelling around there now for 40 years off and on, but for the last few years, every time I go there, I go past them. Now I photograph them. But every time I stopped for a photograph, there's people stopping and taking photographs and so on. And I have a practice of whenever I stop in a country town to do something, I'll go to the local shop or the museum or something, and you pay $2 to get into the museum for 5 minutes, or you go and have a chat to somebody, or you go and buy a drink or something to eat from the local shop, of contributing back to the economy, because it's all very well to have these things. But if it doesn't encourage people to spend money, then it doesn't really matter. And I was talking to the woman who's owned a general store in one of these towns for the last 20 or 30 years, and she said that her revenue has doubled since the artwork went up.
So that goes to show how many more people are coming through.
And people are stopping. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that and I, anecdotally, I don't know, there will be evidence, but I don't have my fingertips on it. But it's firstly that they're actually stopping in the towns, but they're deliberately going out of their way to go to those places and drive up that road. So this is not just people who would ordinarily be driving from south to north or north to south in Western Victoria, who now stopping in towns. It's people are choosing to do it. An example, when I was there on last weekend, and I was photographing a couple of them, I was speaking to somebody who had stopped, and it's one of the little towns that just doesn't have one big silo that's painted. They've got these little, what are called portable silos. They're small things about 3 metres tall and about 2.5 or 3 metres wide in diameter, and they're on a frame that's on wheels, so that you can actually sort of reverse this sort of lever system and push the wheels down and then stick them on the back of a trailer and tow them around. So again, that's for small farmers who are able to do that they don't have these giant harvesters and pulling things. And this town has 8 of those scattered around, and each of them is painted a different thing. And this woman was photographing one, and she was asking me if I'd found them all, and I actually showed her on there's a little map of them. Yeah. And I showed
just like
her on
Pokemon,
the phone.
You've got to catch them all.
Exactly. And I said, what brings you here? And she said, we're from Queensland, and we were down in Melbourne, and we just decided that we'd drive up through this way. And that's hundreds of kilometres out of your way, instead of just driving the straight line back to Brisbane. And so people are deliberately going out there now and doing the trail. It's not just they're stopping to have a look at one. It's an interesting thing.
So how should people try and go and enjoy the silo trail, or even just see some of this stuff? What would you recommend, and where should they begin? Is there a single silo that is just mind blowing? Or
no. Well, they all have their own appeal.
Yeah.
I think. Well, there is a website, and I think it's called Australian Silo Art or something like that. And if you just search Australian Silo Art, you'll find the website that maintains a listing of all of the silo art.
AustralianSiloArtTrail.com.
There you go. And you can then filter by state.
Yeah.
And then look at each of the ones there and decide where you want to go. And
oh man,
there's about 50 of them.
Australian Silo Art and go to Google Images and they're absolutely stunning. Some of them are huge. Some of them are just one big silo. A whole bunch of them are, they're usually several silos next to one another, right? And they're some of these images are insane, like the sunsets with sheep.
Yeah.
There's a
look up the one in Sheep Hills.
Sheep Hills.
Yeah.
All right, Sheep
Which
Hills.
is where my great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather had a farm.
Is this the one with the Indigenous people in front of it? Yeah. That's sort of done at night time?
Yeah, it's spectacular.
Almost looks like a bit of a Van Gogh painting, but with faces on it, right?
Yeah, and there's elders and young children and
Holy
stuff.
crap. You see that? So I've brought the image up on the screen here, and you don't really appreciate how large it is until you see them using a cherry picker, which is a type of truck that has that
it's a little crane with
on top of it that a person can sit
Yeah.
in, and he is, absolutely tiny compared to the face, like smaller than the iris on the eye. It blows my mind how they can paint these, because you obviously have to, it's one thing to have the ability to see the entire painting in front of you whilst you're doing that, but it's another thing to obviously have the image planned out and then have it so big that when you're close up, you can't really see it proportionately, correctly, because it's going to just, zoom out from you.
Exactly.
As well as like the paintings where you walk past on the ground, people do them on the ground and they're kind of like stretched out, or the ads on the ovals when you watch the footy.
Yeah, watching football.
And you have to be from a certain
TV.
angle and then it sticks up at you.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool. All right. Well, we'll end up there and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
See ya. Alrighty, you mob, thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of The Goss. If you would like to watch the video, if you're currently listening to it and not watching it, you can do so on the Aussie English channel on YouTube. You'll be able to subscribe to that. Just search Aussie English on YouTube. And if you're watching this and not listening to it, you can check this episode out also on the Aussie English podcast, which you can find via my free Aussie English podcast application on both Android and iPhone. You can download that for free, or you can find it via any other good podcast app that you've got on your phone. Spotify, podcasts from iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. I'm your host, Pete. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a ripper of a day, and I will see you next time. Peace!